We're going to be taking in a lot of jobs, a lot of plants and factories. We're going to make a lot of money, and we're going to cut taxes for the people of this country. And it's possible we'll do a complete tax cut, because I think the tariffs will be enough to cut all of the income tax. And we're going to start with people making less than $200,000 a year.
That's President Trump suggesting revenue from his tariffs will allow Congress to eliminate income taxes for the middle class. The president will meet with the Speaker of the House today, Mike Johnson, at 2 p.m. Eastern, as Congress has returned from the Easter recess. They got back this morning, and they are now working on executing President Trump's agenda. One committee will vote, the Oversight Committee will vote this week on a plan to cut from the federal employee pension system. Congressional leaders reportedly aiming to have the reconciliation package ready before the Memorial Day recess. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent reportedly telling a group of investors the tax cuts could be passed by the 4th of July. However, Republicans are still mulling how to pay for it all, debating a millionaire's tax now, and that to offset the low and middle income tax cuts. I spoke with Florida Congressman Byron Donalds yesterday, and I asked him if raising taxes on the rich is part of the agenda. Watch.
No, that's not in my plan. And look, there's been whispers of this, but this is not concrete. We have to cut spending. We have to be fiscally responsible. We have to be serious about spending. We can't allow bloated federal spending to continue just because you're worried about the midterm elections.
If the 37% goes to 39.5 or 38.6, that is a tax, a larger tax on the top earners, which is in and of itself may be okay if it creates $15 to $25 billion for further cuts to the middle class or the lower class. Am I open to that? Sure, I'm open to that. But I also don't want to destroy the economy in the process, because those top earners are also the wealth creators.
Joining me now is New York Congresswoman Claudia Tenney. Congresswoman, it's great to see you. We've got so much to talk with you about. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much, Maria. It's great to be on.
First, can you give us an update on what your expectations are? You're back at work about an hour, and we want to understand where this reconciliation package stands. Where do you see things going?
Well, Maria, the Ways and Means Committee has been working on this nonstop. We have been trying to figure out every configuration to do a couple things. First of all, we have to renew the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that were passed by President Trump. That's how we're going to continue with growth. That's how we're going to give lower middle income taxpayers the tax cut that they have now. If it expires, you're going to see a huge increase in taxes, which would have a downward effect on our need for having growth. Obviously, we need to cut spending, as you saw my colleague Byron Donalds talking about. We need to actually unleash American energy. We need to make sure that we have a transparent and accountable government. You know, obviously cutting is part of that. And this is where we've got to go, a future that is going to be less taxes. Right now, we are hemming and hawing over all the provisions of the tax cut. And as you know, Maria, we are stuck in this process of reconciliation because not a single Democrat will vote with us to cut taxes for their own constituents. So we have to work through reconciliation, and we have a static number that we work with the Congressional Budget Office and the Joint Tax Commission that says we have to be within these numbers. Even though we could get dynamic growth, we can't look at dynamic scoring. So we have just a little bit of room to work with when you take the original Tax Cuts and Jobs Act under President Trump and add the new provisions that we're trying to do. So we're trying to thread a very narrow needle. And I just want to say something really important about why I think it's terrible that the Democrats aren't being bipartisan. When President Ronald Reagan passed his tax cuts in 1986, he had Democratic support. Most of the bills and the initiatives that we are going through in the Ways and Means Committee, which I'm calling our exhaustive tax camp, we're in there, all hours trying to figure out how to make this work. There are Democrat bipartisan initiatives in all of this, but they refuse to support us. So we're going to have to do this with our very narrow margin. That's why the Speaker is going to go speak with President Trump and make sure we can get really the best of the best into this provision so we maximize growth, making sure we cover the border, cut the cost of government, and also unleash American energy. It's all part of the entire formula that President Trump is looking for to really bring us back to where we should be had we not had 4 years of a downturn under President Biden and the Democrats.
Well, that's right. And unfortunately, you're dealing with, $7 trillion spent under Joe Biden, and it's increasingly tough, I would imagine, to get back to pre-COVID spending given this huge nut that you've got to crack. And thank you for working on this, even while you guys were on recess for the Easter holiday. I mean, you're on House Ways and Means, and you're getting into the numbers here. How is it possible that you were able to identify $1.5 trillion in cuts, and the Senate comes out with its version of a bill, and it's $4 billion in cuts?
Yeah, look, the Senate is putting out a number that we don't have to comply with. We want the cuts. It's a bone of contention on our side. We are the tax writing, and the House of Representatives is where origination of these appropriations and this process begins. The Senate put out that number. We've had joint meetings. We'll do that and continue that. Look, Maria, this is not going to be an easy process. There's going to be a lot of horse trading going on in the next several weeks. But we want the cuts. We have to have the cuts. Those cuts or those expenditures during COVID have put us on a very bad trajectory. We need to go back to real cuts, and that's the only way we're going to get the growth we need if we're going to continue the tax cuts. So it's a very interesting dynamic that we're trying to work with here. But I think we can do it. But look, some of this stuff is ridiculous with COVID, and you've seen what DOGE has uncovered. There have been all kinds of wasteful spending, lack of transparency, missions that are already completed, and we're still spending money on federal employees or federal initiatives that are no longer necessary. So we're not interested in cutting the Medicaid for people who are truly needy, people who are special needs, people who have seniors or people that have children that are dependent. So all those things we want to make sure it's streamlined. The people that are gaming and scamming the system aren't going to be able to do that anymore. We're going to make sure we focus on the people that deserve these benefits. And that's why the Democrats they're just playing this game that we're going to cut everything. That's not true.
Yeah, well, I mean, are you also considering saving some money by rolling back some federal funding for Medicaid? Or what about the pension system? I mean, is there waste and abuse in those areas that you could actually tap into?
Well, look, the pension system hasn't come up in the Ways and Means Committee, but in terms of, and Medicaid, that's going to be on the Energy and Commerce Committee. Okay. But we're talking about making sure that we have Medicare. We have Medicare for senior citizens who earn it, and people that have spent their whole life paying into these programs. We're going to make sure they're there, but we're also going to make sure the systems aren't being gamed by various states, including states like New York, who are not careful with taxpayer dollars, and it shows.
Yeah. Let me get your take on the border crackdown. Obviously, now we are looking at President Trump's first 100 days, a huge success when it comes to his first priority, which was a secure border. The president told me yesterday that just 3 people were apprehended at the border last month. Compare that to a year ago when we saw thousands and thousands coming in. Congressman, you recently went to the El Salvadorian prison. You got a firsthand look at the prison holding what we're told are people who are gang members from Tren de Aragua and MS-13. We're looking at some of the video and pictures that you shot with your colleagues on that CODEL, the congressional delegation. What can you tell us about what you witnessed?
Well, look, it's interesting, Maria. That is actually my cell phone footage. So they were very transparent with us. We went through the entire process. And I live in upstate New York, and I represent upstate New York. My region has numerous state prisons, including 2 maximum security prisons that really are more like country clubs. And I know a lot of corrections officers. I was just with one a couple of nights ago, and she's a young woman who works in the prison, was telling me, she said the prisoners are running everything now because of the laws in New York. Now, you go to this prison, it is very clear that these people are in harsh conditions. I'm not going to say this is exactly what we should be doing, but let's look at the results. You go to prison because, number one, you're being punished, and number two, it's deterrence. El Salvador went from being one of the most dangerous places in the world to being the safest place in the Americas. And where have all the gang crime, and these are all gang members, by the way, where have they gone? They're going to Costa Rica and Honduras and Guatemala and neighboring countries because they tolerate the gang violence. And Maria, this is so significant that El Salvador went in and said, look, these gang members, these people are terrorizing our neighborhoods. They're hurting our small businesses. There's murders, there's rapes, there's extortion. And just think about Main Street. When you go down a Main Street in El Salvador, I talked to a business owner there. You didn't own your business. The gang members owned your business. You had the front, but when you made your money, they went and took their money. And guess what? If you didn't pay them, you were killed, somebody in your family was killed, or you were threatened. So now that's cleaned up. People can run their businesses, they can have safe streets, and they can have prosperity in El Salvador again. So the deterrent effect is really significant. And look, these people talk to us. I've toured so many prisons, Maria. This is the first time I've been in a prison where prisoners didn't lurch at me, from their cells. They didn't make lewd gestures. They stood there. They were very polite. If you notice, if you speak Spanish, you can hear they're saying please and thank you to the head of the prison right here. This guy right here that they're showing, he's a guy that was committing crimes in Virginia. The other guy was committing crimes and murders in California. These guys are mostly, from what we gleaned, all murderers, all violent criminals, all engaged in drug trafficking, human trafficking, and things that are a scourge on our communities. We have all these gangs here. Maria, you report about it all the time. We need to crack down. And also, I think there is a way that we could make our prisons better. We have Kathy Hochul, who is doing a horrible job. Our prisons are dangerous. They're dangerous to inmates. They're dangerous to the prisoners, and they're dangerous to our communities.
That's unbelievable. Congresswoman, how did you feel being at that prison?
I'm more afraid going into Auburn and some of these maximum security prisons in upstate New York. I toured Auburn for an hour and a half. Two corrections officers were attacked. So not afraid at all to be in there. It was surreal. I got to say, it's like an odd, it was strange, but
I could imagine.
Definitely a different experience.
And I saw your chairman, Jason Smith, there with you as well. What a fantastic delegation to go and tour this and come back with this information. Really valuable, Congressman. Thank you so much for spending the time and doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, great to see you.
Thank you so much. We were actually on a trade mission. Yeah. So this was a side trip.
Unbelievable. Well, quite the side trip. Congressman, it's great to see you this morning.
Yes,
Thank you.
Well, it was stunning for sure.
I'm sure. I want to hear more about it. I'm just enthralled. Thank you. Claudia Tenney in New York this morning. Stay with us. We'll be right back.